Hi everyone, it's Katie from Chords Records. It's a listening shelf edition. I've done a few of these. It's where I share with you what I've been listening to, what I've recently purchased, and that's the bulk of what I'm going to talk about today. And I'm starting off with 3 jazz albums. And the first one is this fascinating one called, it's interpretations by the Stan Getz Quintet with Norman Grant's liner notes there. This one is the Australian pressing, and it's very hard to find out any information about it. On Discogs, there's like 8 people who want it and 6 people who have it. But it was a Norman Grant's kind of release, and then subsequently on Clef, so you can see it there. And it was recorded in 1953, and this came out in around about 1954, and this is the Australian press, as I said. It is so fantastic. It's plays beautifully. I mean, there's a few... It probably needs a really good clean for a start. There's a few sort of crackles, a couple of pops, but really swinging jazz, like fantastic. The players on here, I'll just read them out because it's nowhere on the liner notes or anything. They don't credit the players at all. But the players are Teddy Kotick on bass, Frank Azzola on drums, piano is John Williams, and he plays on track 5, I think. And whoever's playing the piano is just brilliant, but he's the only one I can find credited, and it's really fantastic jazz piano. I love jazz piano. Of course, Stan Getz on tenor sax, and the trombone is Bob Brookmeyer. So, and I'll just show you the vinyl. Deep groove. Really happy to pick this up. Super cheap, and yeah, you can tell it's quite... There's not a scratch on it. It plays beautifully. So really happy to have picked that up. If any of you know more about this album, I'd really appreciate some information. So if you could drop something in the comments, that would be fantastic. Right, and then the other 2 jazz albums I just want to quickly mention are just my further expansion of this Verve series from the 70s. They're pretty easy to come by. They're always cheap. They're usually in perfect condition because no one ever played them. But for me, I love them. And they're these compilations of that Verve put out in around about 1976. They're usually gatefold with some fantastic liner notes on Verve, as I said, and there was a whole series of them, probably 30 or 40 of them, and I've been collecting them. They always have this beautiful illustration painted cover on them, and they're a really good way to get into an artist if you're not familiar with the music, or you haven't got the capacity, whether it's funds or space, to buy entire collections of a particular artist. They're really good compilations of a particular artist, and this one is The Genius of Bud Powell. Bud Powell's remarkable 1949 to 51 solo and trio sessions, including 9 works performed unaccompanied, and group recordings with Max Roach, Buddy Rich, Ray Brown and Curly Russell. So that I picked up that one. I've probably got about 8 or 9 of these now. And then the other one I picked up was this fantastic Bill Evans one. Look at that fantastic painting. And this is trio. Bill Evans' brilliant mid-60s sessions with drummer Paul Motian and bassist Gary Peacock with guitarist Jim Hall. And this album is classic Bill Evans. It's so fantastic. Again, the gatefold with the really great liner notes. And the liner notes in this case were written by Charles Mitchell, and he's associate editor of Downbeat and co-host with jazz program Straight No Chaser in Chicago. So yeah, I was really pleased to pick these up. In Australia, you get them probably for around $30 or $40 when you find them, and they come up in all sorts of places. And if ever I see one, I pick it up. And I know you can get them on Discogs, but I like to find them in the wild. Right, the next album is probably my pick of the bunch. I'm so excited to share this with you, and that is the incredible release by Impressed Recordings. I've spoken to you about Impressed Recordings before, an amazing Australian record label run by a guy called Luke Bevans, who releases fresh music. He signed some artists, but he does re-releases of classic albums. He does compilations of, things. He does soundtracks, and they're all limited edition, not unlike Blood Records in the UK, but sort of smaller and very supportive of Australian music. And they're always numbered to 200 or 300. And this one was no exception. And this is very, very special. This is a double album, Conway Savage. So who was Conway Savage? He was the keyboardist, vocalist, backing vocalist for Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds for nearly 3 decades, until he very sadly passed away in 2018 of a brain tumour. And his family and bandmates and friends have come together and pulled this compilation together called Too Dark to See. And it's, as I said, it's a double album. It's solo and collaborative recordings from 1992 to 2010. And I have to say, it is exquisite. It's going to be up there in my top albums of the year. They've knocked it out of the park with this. I think there might be a tour by some of the ex-bandmates of the Bad Seeds, maybe and friends, touring Australia, and this album's accompanying that, in honour of Conway Savage. He was a remarkable musician. He had a solo career in his own right. He'd released a couple of albums. And his voice is not unlike Nick Cave, very deep, but at times has this fragility of like a Jeff Buckley, but very Leonard Cohen-y, but the music is melodic and his piano playing is beautiful. There's an outstanding track, and there's a female accompaniment on quite a few of the tracks, but there's an outstanding track at the end of side 3 called Just One of Those Things, and it's got the most beautiful piano solo. I cannot recommend this album highly enough. If you like Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, if you indeed know Conway Savage, I highly recommend you get it. I got the limited to 200 Lilac edition, which I'll show you, which sold out immediately, but they're taking pre-orders for the black vinyl, and that will be limited as well. And I would absolutely get it if you're into this kind of stuff. This is the beautiful kind of lilac one. It's up on Impressed Recordings now, so you can pre-order that. I think it's expected to ship around September, but just a beautiful gem of an album, which might go missed if you don't know what to look for. So I encourage that. Okay, the next ones are 2 really old school 60s, 70s rock albums, and then I'll end with 2 new releases. I was thrilled. I jumped onto one of those eBay lives, which is not unlike Whatnot if you've done it, but they're hilarious because usually it's not that sophisticated yet, and the people on the eBay lives sort of kind of don't know what they're talking about or doing, particularly the guy that I purchased these off. It was a very funny evening, and I probably spent too much money. But he pulled up this vinyl, and it's an Australian band called The Loved Ones, who were only around for 2 years, from 1965 to 1967, and they had a mega hit called The Loved Ones, and you would know that In Excess covered that album, and you would know that version if you look up In Excess, The Loved Ones. The original was these guys. What's really special about this album, this is a reissue originally issued 1967, and this is the reissue in 1970 on this original blue label, the W&G, and they go for a lot of money if you find a good copy of it. And this is pretty good. Like, you can sort of see there's not really, it's a bit sort of scratched, you can see there, but it plays. Like, look at all those little mini scratches. It plays really well. There's nothing that you can really feel. It's a bit battered and bruised, but it's such a riot. And I have to say, I had never listened fully through to the album, and I sort of looked up these guys, and they were jazz musicians before they formed kind of the British invasion type music, the Beatles, etc. And they're probably more likened to more like the Rolling Stones, to be honest. They're a bit more rocky, but you can tell they come from a jazz background, because they've got grooves for days. So it's that kind of gorgeous bluesy rock, but with jazz sensibility, in sort of wrapped up in a beautiful rock and roll bow. And I loved this album, so I'm really happy to add this to my Antipodean collection, which is slowly growing. If you've been watching my channel, you know I'm sort of really trying to educate myself on early Australian rock. And now for something completely different, and this one may surprise you, may not, I don't know. Uriah Heap, Salisbury. Up until I bought this album and put it on the turntable, I had never listened to Uriah Heap. I'd never streamed them. I'd never owned an album. I knew little about them. I knew them in the zeitgeist of the world, like of sort of early 70s sort of prog rock. I thought they were a bit more heavy metal than they turned out to be, but never really gave them much of a listen. And as I'm kind of going through my I'm really trying to educate myself on gaps in my music knowledge, and this was one of them. And I saw this album in the same auction that I saw The Loved Ones, and it was going for like $5 or $6, I think. And I thought, I'm going to get that. And this is such an interesting album. It's the second album from Uriah Heap, released in 1972. I think it was 1972. I might have got that wrong. As I said, see previous note, I'm not an expert. This is a gatefold. And I think Salisbury might be a old military base in the UK. As soon as this album started, I had no idea they were progressive rock. And this is very progressive rock. There's like a 15-minute song on here. And the guy's got almost like he's got kind of like a high soprano-y voice at times, almost operatic. And you can kind of see where like a Freddie Mercury might have come from following this. And I mean, I don't know much about them, and I think they might be considered a bit of a second-rate, maybe, I don't know, Led Zeppelin, not sure. Tell me in the comments what you think. But for me, I loved it, and I'm going to buy more. Absolutely loved it. So, educating myself on Uriah Heap. And I should say, this was on bronze, and I do know that the original UK ones, I think the original one might have come out on Vertigo, but they subsequently came out on bronze, the label bronze. And this is an Australian press, and it's imported. So I'm assuming that, potentially it's the same plates. It sounds fantastic. It's a really, really great quality album. Right, and then finally, I'm just going to quickly finish off the Listening Shelf video today with 2 new releases by some female singer-songwriters. And I had high expectations for one and average expectations for the other, and it flipped when I got them, and I love it when music surprises you. So the first one was Visitor by Sienna Spiro. So this is kind of the new sort of singer du jour in the UK, 20-year-old, found fame on TikTok, and has Adele, Amy Winehouse-like vocals, kind of very sort of sultry soul pop. And I'd seen a little bit of her, and I immediately bought this album. I thought, this is going to be brilliant. I love her. And then when I put it on, I was surprised at how less impressed I was with the album as a whole. She sounded 20. She sounded quite young, and some of her vocals weren't up to scratch that I thought they would be. So I'm not sure if it's Emperor New Clothes me buying this or not. What do you think? I'd be interested to know. But that's I'm going to keep it. It's good enough that I'll keep. I'm not getting rid of it. Sienna Spiro, her debut album, Visitor. And then finally, this was the one that I had average expectations of, but I got her first album, so I thought I'd get her second album, and that's Gracie Abrams' Daughters from Hell. And unfortunately, I'd read some sort of pretty average reviews as well. And you know, there are some that are giving her good reviews, but some of the critics that I admire are giving her like 2 out of 5 stars, and I love it. So there you go. That's my taste for you. I purchased the alternative cover only because I love black and white photography, and I just thought it was a beautiful photo session. And it comes in a you can see this here. It's actually beautifully presented. I was really impressed, and it came with let's see if I can get it out, a signed art portrait, which is also quite lovely. And the actual lyric booklet, which sort of reminds me of the Ray album from earlier in the year. It comes in this little package, a little envelope that you open up. And it's a beautiful little booklet, like beautifully presented with all the lyrics, sort of as a poetry book, if you like. And then all the credits at the back, and then the thank yous. But you can see sort of like presented like a poetry book, really beautifully presented. So hats off to her and her team for that. And you know, I think some of the criticism has come from it sounded a little bit sort of samey same as some of the other singer-songwriters. It was produced by Aaron Dessner, who's got, you know, sort of pretty great credentials from the National. And there's, you know, people do sort of suggest that there's a bit of nepotism because of her father, J.J. Abrams, obviously from Lost and Star Wars fame. But I think she's the real deal, and I've seen her sing, acoustically, and I think she can sing. I think her songs are good. I think if you like Taylor Swift, you'd like her. She's friends with Mumford and Sons, you know, that sort of vibe. But again, another one I'm not going to get rid of, and I was happily surprised at how much I enjoyed it more than Visitor by Sienna Spiro. So there you go. All right, thanks very much for watching The Listening Shelf, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.